Hi Freelancer, welcome to today's episode of the Freelance Blueprint. I'm your host Lizzie, a freelance UX designer and digital nomad. Today we're joined by Frank, a freelancer who offers brand strategy and brand identity. We're talking about how he created a process of designing a brand for his clients with 0 revisions needed, how he came up with his distinct branding, and that might be a little surprise to you too, and how putting yourself out there creates opportunities and led him to talking to one of the most iconic logo designers in today's society in his own podcast. Frank got the chance to talk to Rob Janoff, who is the designer of the Apple logo. So let's find out more about Frank's journey, how he got into branding, and why he chose pink. Hi Frank, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Where are you calling from?
I'm from Sydney, Australia, a little bit west of Sydney in a little town called Lithgow, but I've been here with my wife and kids. They're obviously out at the moment, but this is where I am.
Nice. If I wouldn't know anything about you, but I would meet your wife, how would she describe you to me?
It depends on the day, maybe, but it depends on the context. I feel like I'm slightly two different people based on work and normal life. With work, with G'day Frank and my business, it's a little bit more, some might say eccentric, a little bit more energy, talking a lot. Versus home life with friends, my family, obviously, a little bit more subdued, a little bit more easygoing and not as loud and verbose, which is where my son takes that that from me, and he's the loud one in our family. So yeah, two slightly different people in that respect, but in terms of the genuine nature of maybe who I am and how my wife might describe me, I'm quite passionate about what it is I do. I'm quite interested in the things I am interested in, and really lean into those things and do them like as if they're going out of fashion, kind of like this pink that I do wear all the time for my business. But that might be how she describes me, but I'm a little bit of a silly person here and there with her, so it's a slightly different experience with her again.
Sounds nice though, sounds super nice. So you're a brand strategist, you have your own business. Was that something you always knew you wanted to do?
No, actually no. Maybe, but I think probably the answer is no. I always saw my dad as kind of like a self-made person. While he worked with lots and lots of people, he was his own kind of contracting business, and he worked in the music industry. So he never had a what you would call a job, I guess is the word, or an employer. It was always contracted work, I guess, for the most part of the time that I've been alive. So seeing him in that role, I guess, was something as a bit of a blueprint for me to go, this is possible. So when the day came, it was like, okay, I think I can work this out.
So what did you do before then? We mentioned briefly before that you worked in production. So how was your journey from when you finished school to where you're at now?
So for me, it was a case of working with a TV production company. What I did for 7 years was work in their development team to create new television shows for television here in Australia. Our success rate was fairly low. The hit rate is just like a service-based industry where you might have only 3% of what you put out into the world is actually listening and wanting to watch and all the rest of it. So pitching new shows every day was something that was just a done thing for us, and coming up with the identity for those shows, be it a logo, be it the look and feel of it, was my job. My team would come up with the idea of the show. They'd write a bit of a treatment for what the show was about and how we'd pitch it. And then we'd either do a sales brochure or a slide deck, or what you call a sizzle reel, where you'd have an animated kind of video put together to really sell the dream. So that's what I did for 7 years.
So how did you transition from that into branding?
Well, I think it got to a point where I wasn't going to be going anywhere in that company. There wasn't like a hierarchy of creatives. I was kind of like one of the only creatives that did what I did in terms of the design aspect. Everyone was very creative in the building, but there wasn't a pathway to being creative director or art director, looking like I am now with this beanie and glasses and beard kind of thing. It was a case of, I think, probably finding some people on YouTube kind of sparked the idea of creating a design business, and that it could be done, and it could be something that I'm doing what I am doing now, but in my own time, not be employed, not be part of a company, and help other businesses do what it is I was doing on a day-to-day basis with TV, but more of a corporate setting. and just kept researching more and more about this. And this was not long after my son was born in August of 2017. So me and my wife got married the year prior, had our son, and I was like, okay, well, the focus has very much not been on me, and respectively, it was on my wife and my son. But I was like, okay, well, what could I do now that removes me out of this to do something that's a challenge and go from that? And it was just a natural progression of going, okay, this sounds good, and just like perpetually grew into something that was very attractive. Very full-heartedly jumped straight into it by quitting my job, and just launching into it come July 1st, 2018. So only 6 months kind of later. But the thing that I guess saved me or made the leap a little bit more of a step rather than a leap, very cushioned step at that, was keeping my previous employer as a client. So I kept doing the similar kind of work for about 18 months after, did some extra jobs for them, so that meant a little bit more income as well. But it kind of piddled out into a case of them wanting to have still an in-house person, and we parted ways. But that first little step there, yeah, it was just a kind of an idea of doing something myself and seeing if I could do this myself. And 6 years later now, I'm still going at it, which is thank goodness, you know.
Nice though. Like, I think it's an interesting way and also an easy, I mean, it's not always easy going freelance, but at least an easier way than diving straight into it. And I think a lot of people forget that they can use their previous employer as their first client. That's actually a very good thing to do, because either way, they have to bridge the gap until they hire and onboard someone new. For the people who are watching this on YouTube, they can see your beanie, your glasses, your water bottle, and your whole pink setup, and also see your fingernails. Or do you have those today? I think your daughter painted them for you. Yeah.
I do. They're a little bit terrible, but yeah, they're still there.
I don't think they're terrible. I mean, look, it's quite small. You can't see. But why did you choose pink for your own branding?
Yeah, this has been going on for a few years of why pink, leaning into pink. Stereotypically, it's a very less masculine color nowadays. But it originally started when I started G'day Frank as like a dark navy blue and this pink. And for no other reason, no strategy behind it other than pink for girls, blue for boys, and be kind of agnostic. And that was kind of it. I don't really think in terms of color theory all that much, apart from just keeping it very simple and attractive and can get attention. And those two colors were very vibrant. But the problem I found after about a year or two of using it was that they contrasted a little too much, and they were fighting for too much attention. They didn't quite work as well together. And over time, I just kind of fell out of love with that blue. And my favorite color is more of a cyan color. Why I didn't use the two of them, I mean, I wish it would have been like a printer that has cyan, magenta, and yellow in their logo. But I stuck with the pink because it was the color that I think stood out the most, the more attractive color to stop someone scrolling in the feed, something that's unexpected, I guess, for a male, until I found other blokes like me using pink for their branding business, which was just happenstance. I suppose there's only so many colors in the rainbow, but that's where the pink came into the fold of things. And since then, I feel like I've just lent into everything pink. To the point where this beanie I'm wearing today was made by my mother-in-law, who's very good at knitting, as is my wife. And she was like, ta-da. I'm like, no way, that's perfect. Something to add every few weeks or months is always fun. So yeah, that's the story behind pink.
I assume you created your own branding?
Yes, which is hard. It is hard. And I'm sure there's a follow-up question to that. But yeah, it's a hard one to create your own branding. I'll preface that.
Yeah, so the question actually, because I noticed in your content that you're quite good with creating brands and identity strategies for other clients without as many revisions. So how many revisions was it working for yourself? Because also from a personal perspective, I'm not by any means a brand expert, but I studied brand and advertising. So I know the basics, let's say. And I struggled so much creating my own brand. So yeah, how was the process for you being your own client?
Yeah, the age-old saying on this topic is it's hard to read the label from inside the jar. And if you get that, I guess, analogy or metaphor or proverb, whatever it is. It's difficult doing something for yourself. And I've always found this, that creating personal projects is always quite difficult if there's not a specific process in mind to treat it not so personally. Like, I'll give you an example. Creating my own wedding invitations a few years back was a nightmare of like, what do I do for this? Because there's self-imposed pressure to be the designer and look like a really nice outcome. It's safe to say it did turn out very nice, but with the branding for Dave Frank, it has been for until today even a very evolving process, a very evolving brand in terms, especially its look. I mentioned before the color changes happened, but even the logo had changed. And I had this fanciful idea to begin with of looking something like two very big branding agencies in the world, Landor and Pentagram, and they use a serif font, and it's, I don't know what the idea behind the font choice is, but I was like, maybe I should just emulate what is great, what the benchmark is, as that's how I've kind of learned how to design over time, is not copying, but looking what people do and then learning from it, and having that eye to see what works and what doesn't. And so that evolved from serif font into something that was much more my own style of a sans serif font, which I found this font called Visby. It's, I don't know, something like Helvetica nearly, but just something that felt more on brand to me. And that took 2 years to get to then. And then ever since, I've just gone, stuff it, just leave it alone, keep the logo, keep it nice and simple, just a plain GF in a circle, and let the kind of story be told of my clients that I work with, and then just show up with pink as the more distinctive asset than the logo. Some people haven't even recognized my logo, and that's totally fine. They recognize the pink or my face or my accent maybe, more than the logo. So for me, the logo isn't a very big thing, and that's kind of become my ethos generally for my clients as well, is to take the focus off your logo and be more present in other ways and think of your brand in other ways. But in terms of the other side to the branding, apart from the visual, is the message. And that's, for me, has always been the harder part of what message am I going to convey to somebody. It's easy for me to write, or easier to write it for my clients than it is for me, 100%. So that's the struggle for me, is to ever evolve the message and stay consistent with it, because I tend to kind of go with the moment, and that's why I kind of say it's a bit of an evolving brand every day. You kind of don't know what kind of message you're going to get from me sometimes. But yeah, I always feel like it's always going to be an ever evolving beast, if you will, and to the point where I'm probably never going to be happy with it, just like most artists aren't ever really happy with their work until they're dead, kind of thing, and that's when the value improves. But yeah, for me, it's just that evolution, I guess.
I also wonder if it's because it's a personal brand and every person evolves in a way. So maybe it evolves as you grow as a person and change.
That's very insightful. Yes, absolutely. I would agree with that 100%. Thinking about it now, it's something that and I've said this a couple of times to different people, is that my personality, I think, has changed dramatically in terms of the confidence of putting myself out there and engaging with people. Most creatives are fairly introverted in terms of the manner of being fairly outgoing and wanting to talk with others and engaging in and putting the energy out there into spaces where it's just soul sucking, where you're like, there's too much. But for me, making content, putting myself out there, having conversations with people like yourself, it drives you to elevate, I guess, your personality in a way that's probably deep down inside you, but just to, I guess, bring it out. And for me, I think the evolution, especially in my content, seeing how I did communicate to begin with, was very a fake it till you make it kind of attitude, just but I could see the tension of showing up comfortably. Whereas now I could just talk verbatim off whatever, and it's comfortable. It's not, there's no anxiety to it. Getting up on stage might be the next hurdle for me to do that in person with people, especially to a larger audience. I've done it to smaller audiences, but there's definitely a personality shift, especially bringing a personal brand to the table, which I think a lot of founders, business owners take for granted and maybe push to the side, not thinking it's going to be all that hard. They get into it and you go, okay, this is a little bit difficult. Yeah.
I always wonder, because I'm not in the same journey. I have like different like I started somewhere else, but I'm also like trying to build a personal brand and all these kind of things. And as soon as there's a camera pointed at you, something just flips and your brain doesn't work as normally. And it feels like you have to find yourself again, but also you feel like I personally feel like this, that I have to amplify who I am much more to come across on camera, because I feel like the camera steals a lot of your energy. How was it for you? Did you find anything that was more helpful to get from the bit more quiet side to become more confident? Was it over time? What was it like for you?
The sucking the energy part out of you, I can very much relate to, because in your mind you think you're giving it all, but then you watch it back and go, that's kind of boring. And you're going to go, well, how much more do I need to give, to the point where you feel like you're shouting? And my wife even says, like, you're so loud when you're recording your videos. Can you just back it off? And I feel like saying, well, if I do that, then I don't feel as engaging as I want to be, because I feel like if I'm not engaged with what I'm saying when I'm watching my edit back, then why do I expect my consumer or my audience to be? So I kind of need to bring what I call 110% to it, where you just slightly elevate your personality that little bit more. It's kind of like the analogy, I guess the analogy I'd give you is a comparison between Clark Kent and Superman. Clark Kent's the kind of stable, just everyday Joe looking guy. Superman comes in 110% to save the day, and just goes at it with no anxiety, just full confidence, knows how to do the job, and steps up in front of the camera or microphone and does the job. And I've had those instances where I've had a really long thing to say, which I'm very bad at, and it's why I use a teleprompter a lot of the time now to record what I'm saying. But there was a time where I did a podcast with the creator of the Apple logo, Rob Janoff, a few years back, and he was a lovely man, and it was kind of imposing, because it was like, there's someone I'm looking up to and to aspire to create a logo as not as good as him, but just something that goes on to be as great as what Apple has. And I had this really long spiel to start with to promote the venue that we were in, and it was long. And I was like, I'm never going to remember this without looking down. But the camera turned on, and having the experience of doing this over and over, I was like, game on. Like, this is game time. This is like a sports star that steps onto a court or a field and goes, now it's my time to shine. I know what I'm doing. And I just nailed it. And I was like, oh, like inside I couldn't say I've just nailed that, but like, just to me, I was like giving myself little fist bumps going, yes, nailed that. And that's a lovely moment to feel confident in your own space. And that's kind of what I feel like now, is you feel that confidence in your space, talking about what you know and love and are very interested in, or passionate, as some people would say. I don't find it passionate, but I find keen interest in this. And yeah, you change that little bit to feel that confidence. But it sometimes it's just who you end up speaking to sometimes that can really set you back a couple of steps, and you go, whoa. But that gets you excited, I think, for me at least.
Yeah, I actually watched it on YouTube, the podcast episode, and it's quite, wow.
Nice.
You get to talk to the person who designed the Apple logo. And how did this come about? How did this happen? And what was it like for you when you realized it is actually going to happen? You get to talk to him and ask him all the brand questions any designer would love to ask.
Yeah. And like, how many questions can I ask, kind of thing, within the time allowance. So this came about in terms of creating content, and a lot of the opportunities that I've found doing what it is I do, of showing up on Instagram and LinkedIn, and do on TikTok and some other places, but not so much as prevalent, is it opens these doors to new connections and opportunities that you probably wouldn't think are out there. And just being present, being on people's radar, you come to mind just like you'd want your clients to come to mind when they see the branding that you've made for them, at least in my case. Anyway, so putting out this content, I was doing this podcast at the time called Two Red Chairs. It was just conversations with other designers about their life. And into my DMs on Instagram popped in a bloke named Andy, who works with Rob in his agency here in Australia. And Rob has an agency both parked in Australia and in Chicago. And Andy said, mate, would you like to have a chat with Rob? I said, excuse me?
Is this a spam?
Yeah. And I didn't really know Andy all that well. It was the first time I really connected with Andy. And he said, look, I I work with Rob Janoff, the creator of the Apple logo. Would you like to maybe interview him on a podcast? He's coming to Sydney for a client event, and we have some time if you would like to do it. Oh, I've said, yeah, of course. Like, I'll figure it out. However we're going to do it, I'll figure it out. So that was like a few months prior. Then leading up to it, I was like, what do I do? Do I just bring in my rinky-dink setup that I had to this hotel that we're going to meet at and just kind of wing it and it'd be okay because it's just going to be audio? Or do I go hell for leather and make this something that is possibly for YouTube, like I had been recording other videos for my podcast? And messaged a mate of mine that I went to university with, who is very good at video production. He's worked with Amazon and Uber and all these really big brands. And I said, mate, do you have any time? And we did design visual communication together at university. So this is in his kind of alley still. I said, do you have any time to come with me with your camera gear and meet Rob Janoff, Apple logo designer extraordinaire, and film me and him having a conversation? By all means, you can chat to him too throughout the process, but would you want to do that if you have the time? I can't pay you anything, but I feel like this might be an experience you'd be interested in. And he said, yeah, absolutely, let's do it. And so we came in with all his bags of gear and everything and into this hotel, and we got told the wrong hotel. It was like 2 doors down. We got told the wrong hotel. So we were waiting there. And then they said, oh, no, sorry, I've told you the wrong hotel. We need to go to this one, which was an even nicer hotel. And I was like, holy hell. Okay, cool. And then we got in there. I spoke with Rob. I let my mate Dave do all the things he needed to do to set up, and he went overkill. There was like 3 different cameras, 5 different microphones, all these lights in this bar setting. And I just sat down going, okay, this is happening. Cool. And we nailed it out of the park. It was only a very short conversation, 20 to 30 minutes, but that's all we really needed. It was enough. And for the next 2 hours after, me and my mate Dave just sat in the foyer going, well, that just happened. That sweet kind of thing. So yeah, that was that experience.
It's so interesting because I completely understand why this is so special, but at the same time, you forget sometimes we're just all people. That is also a person who had one day went to do their job in an office and then this thing happened. And you never know what something you do today could lead to in a couple of days in the future. Like you said, things like this podcast or, and this is also the reason why I started it. So I have an excuse to talk to people like you. But the thing I found interesting is that they poached you because I thought that maybe you reached out to them and gave it a shot. How is it with your clients right now? Because I've seen that you worked for Star Wars, wow, McDonald's, Volkswagen, Tinder, like big brands that people just know. How do they find you, or do you find them? How do these collaborations start?
So this is the cliff or the, what would you call it? Like the asterisks on the client list that I've had. And they're not exactly clients. They are brands that I have worked with in my career to show the experience that I have working with big and small brands. And those particular brands, Star Wars, Disney, McDonald's, various hosts of others, were in my TV production days. We used to do a lot of brand collaborations with our TV shows, obviously. And I had the opportunity to do my little bit in terms of the design aspect to help integrate the brand with the TV show. If it was a board game activation for Family Feud with Star Wars, or a McDonald's activation with one of our singing shows, X Factor, that was the experience there. And for me, that was cool. That was, fantastic. It was a very small part, not really much like the branding that I'm doing with my clients now, where I'm updating their logo and doing all those things. I'm not working on McDonald's logo or anything like that. It's not to that scale. But what I've found, I guess, to your question is, how do these people find me? Is by creating all this content, is forming relationships with people that I have made over the years in my career, that people come knocking, rather than me doing cold outreach. Never once me doing cold outreach has worked. It's always been a very negative experience for me because it's just a shot to the ego. It's a shot to my confidence every single time. It's gut-wrenching. But for me, I've always found that someone has found me as a result of me putting myself out there. And a few examples of that, one particular client I work with at the moment is a national beverage brand here in Australia. And the only reason that I was contacted was because I used to work with the son of the manager of this business, this brand, when I was working in TV. And there was just that mutual connection saying, mate, do you know anyone that does design? He said, yeah, Dad, I used to work with a guy at the TV production company we both worked at. Here's his email, get in touch. And that formed that. Otherwise, it's an Instagram post or a LinkedIn post or just a referral on from another creator that might want to help me engage with this business that they can't help them with that service that they offer. So they might be a marketing business or they might do web design, let's say. It's creating those kinds of relationships that can potentially flower into the future. And it's always the case where if you do create this content, you never know who's, I guess, watching, because I've had somebody say, I've stalked your stuff for like 2 years now. I've never engaged, obviously, because this is the first time I'm sending a message. I've got this business. I think you could help me. Let's have a chat. And this is the hard part of creating content, that you feel like it might be falling on deaf ears, but you never know who's out there watching, because most of the time the people that engage with you aren't going to be your client. Maybe they are. I'm not saying they won't, but most of the time for me, it's always been someone just lurking in the shadows, which is fine. And one day they just pop up and you go, it's all worth it.
Do you have any tips for people out there who might not have a good network, or they don't know how to build a strong foundation with people, or want to start a personal brand and don't know how? Do you have any tips for them?
Yeah, I think, well, look, I've said throughout this conversation content, if you are willing and able to show up as much as you can across as many platforms as you can, you have no excuse not to, especially if you have no dependents like children and a family to run and a full-scale business of clients to really manage. You have no excuse. Personally, I believe this, and this isn't a knock on you, that if you're not doing it, it's okay if you're not. But this is hopefully something to inspire you to say, I need to pull my finger out. I need to go out there and show up in as many places as possible for somebody to find you. Because it's exactly the same with any business in the world, not just design, is that same as having a shop front. You need to create a shop front so people see you as they walk by. If you're not doing that, then you're failing marketing in a sense, and that might feel really bad, going, oh, I'm not showing up enough. Just the little things can make a difference, like the little things. Just making one post a week might be the little thing that helps. Having your website obviously up and running. A lot of creators might only still have an @Gmail email address. Look a little bit more professional. Give someone the confidence that you know what you're doing and you have put in the due diligence to create a business that you want to help them create as well, with a brand or with whatever creative pursuit you have. Show up respectably. Give somebody, a reason to want to engage with you. Respect their time as well. Not just giving them nothing where you don't show your face, you don't give them your name, like nothing like that. And that's what I guess my mistake was to begin with. My Instagram profile image was my logo. It was the GF with the blue or the pink. And it took me a while to realize, hey, I need to put my face to this. And share me, get on camera as much as I can, share some photos, share some insights and stories, some perspective on what it is I think and do, rather than just regurgitating quotes and that's something I found over a textbook or whatever it is, and keep showing that stuff. But if you're a creative, obviously you are showing work, you are showing your creativity. Don't just show the end result, show the process, give an insight into the value that you are creating and how you are creating it. And you can show that on Instagram. You can show that on LinkedIn. You can show that on Behance, on Dribbble, on Pinterest, and do all those things. So that's creating the content side of things. Bit by bit. Cadence is everything, because everybody drops off. They do this big stint of like 50 posts and go, oh God, that was a lot. And then just peter off. It always happens. I always see it. They do really, really well, and then they just disappear. Sometimes that's because it's worked for them and they've got a lot of clients now and they don't have the time. Fine. But they always come back and then they do the same thing and then dips. And then you got to kind of stay consistent, like any brand. But the networking side of things, if you're not finding the clients to begin with, engage with other creatives and see if you can collaborate on things and just get your foot in the door of things that complement somebody else's skill. So if you live in a small town, my mate had this great idea the other day. He lives in a very small town in America, and he's like, I'm just going to call up every single marketing agency or person in a, I don't know, 50-mile radius, and just say, hey, do you need any help with branding to offer that as an extra service for your clients? And so many digital marketing agencies and marketing agencies just do the promotion side of things. They don't do the brand foundations. Or you might be a web designer or something like that, where you could create an activation sort of landing page for a campaign for a marketing agency. That kind of thing, where you just reach out to those people and see if they do need help with somebody like you to help them to do more for their clients, which I think would be a very big bonus to them. They might have a roster of people already. That's okay. You just kind of find that first, I guess, lead, which is pretty, I would say, a lot easier of a connection or cold outreach than connecting with a business cold. Because I never found that creating that cold relationship up front really leads to that much trust up front. If you did cold outreach with a client, you kind of need to give them a very low barrier to entry service. So let's say if you did branding, graphic design, you go in and offer a business card or something that's very small in terms of the value offering, where there's not huge amount of monetary, investment or time investment, even just to show that you can deliver on what you say and start forming that relationship slowly. It's kind of like dating, I guess, in a way, where you do go on a little date and see how you like each other, and it progresses more into something more substantial. It's a terrible analogy in comparison, but it's something that I guess might just bridge that gap of the concept. But again, it's a long-term thing too. So that's the hard part about all this kind of stuff, is it might not pay off overnight. It might tend to take years, and that's something you got to be prepared for. And you need to have all the other different ducks in a row with a business like this. If it's runway, to have enough in your bank account to go dry with clients for 3 to 6 months, to be able to do this. If you can't, then get a job and do this as a moonlighting exercise until you get that foundation set up. That'd be my advice.
Thank you. I think that's very, really useful advice. I feel you a lot with the cold outreach. I really dislike it. And I like the shop analogy that you gave. So connecting with people, it's like, hey, I have a shop, it's there. But cold outreaching is like handing out flyers on a busy shopping street, and it's like everyone you go, it's like that, and it's so uncomfortable. Yep. You feel like, what am I doing here? Is this gonna go anywhere? Barely anyone takes a flyer. If they do, they just drop it into the next bin because they feel sorry for you that nobody takes a flyer. But when you collaborate with other creatives, it's almost like, oh, you see another person handing out flyers and you're like, do you want to do this together? And you feel a bit less alone. And then I think it could also be more fun handing out flyers that way. When you have the shop front, when you've put yourself out there, what do you do then that people actually come into your shop? And how do you deal with them without scaring them off once you're inside? Because I think it's also, for example, if you go into a McDonald's, you go to these machines. But then if you go to a high luxury brand, maybe you want to browse, or maybe you expect someone to instantly come and talk to you and say, what size do you need, or something like that. So how do you approach it when someone then reaches out to you?
Yeah. So this is, I guess, the Cliff Notes version of the process that I go through with clients. And typically it starts with a message or an email saying, hey, I saw a post or something like that, or I've followed you for a while, or someone's referred you on. And I say, great, let's have a chat. Let's see what is going on, if there's a problem or if there's something aspirational you're trying to achieve. Let's just have a chat. Let's just get on a Zoom call or whatever it is, or just a phone call if you're local. And for 20 minutes, you just tell me what your problem is. How can I help you, basically, is the first question I ask. And they'll just rattle off what it is they think they need. Probably half the time it isn't what they need, or they need more than what they've sort of said. Oh, we need a new logo. It's like, yeah, great. That's the typical kind of tick box. We can do that. That's fine. But have you got this in a row? Have you thought of this? Have you got this? And that's a lot of the time it's no, we'll think about it later, whatever. That's okay. But from there, I say, look, if you would like me to help you, that's totally fine. It's going to cost this much and it'll take this time, and this is what you'll get as a result of it. But if that's not right for you at the moment, please feel free to find other options. I don't want to feel like you need to be committed to this idea and I'm the only one out there. There are plenty of other people out there. So I basically give them the exit door if they want to feel like they're not locked into this. Just like walking into a shop, you want to make sure that there's an exit plan. You know where the exit is so I can get out of here. Similar kind of idea. And just not put pressure on somebody to feel like I'm selling hard. I mean, I probably should sell a little bit harder to sort of convince in a way, but I don't like the idea of convincing. It doesn't work for me. It's a case of saying, this is what I offer. This is how I do it. If you like it, fantastic. Let's work together. If it doesn't work for you, that's fine. I'm not going to lose sleep over someone that doesn't want to work with me because it's not going to produce a conducive relationship down the track. So from that point, if they're agreeing upon it, the next step is typically an agreement and an invoice. They need to pay that up front. They need to sign it up front before we start. I typically take 100% up front because I take the risk otherwise. But if they're not invested 100% in me, then don't work with me. If you're not willing to pay the money up front, sometimes we might split it into a cadence depending on the project, different phases, you might say. So they pay up front for each phase before we begin. It's just like walking into a shop and buying a pair of shoes. You know what you're going to get at the end. You just don't know what exactly it's going to look like, but let's go for it. Trust me, I guess. And then once that's done, the process in terms of getting them on site is doing a workshop to really understand them a lot more in depth, not just giving them a questionnaire, like sending them an email with a questionnaire of 20 questions to go, fill it in. I'll wait. That never works because you get these one-word answers. They don't know how to articulate it. You can't probe them further. It's not effective at all. And I see this problem with a lot of creatives that they do these questionnaires and then they wonder why they have a lot of revisions because they haven't got enough information and context needed to really understand what the client needs. Or they do several different iterations, different concepts and go, what do you think? Because they didn't have enough information. So the way I go about it is do that workshop for 4 hours, 6 hours sometimes with them, maybe over a few days, and ask them a bunch of questions, have a really long conversation, see how invested they are in their business to get a good sense of who they are, who their team is, and the personality, how they all gel together and converse with each other so I can get a sense of the internal brand culture. But also ask, who's your customer? Who's your competitor? Get the kind of lay of the land so I can go off objectively and not have this subjective lens like they have and go out there and go, okay, so that's who their customer actually is. Great. This is who their competitor is. Okay, great. Well, they might be talking total crap about their competitor when the competitor is actually doing a lot better job. And so we've got to get it up to their level and beyond. So that's that part. And then throughout the process, it's creating one concept to rule them all, like one pink ring to rule them all. It's one single-minded idea, because if you create more than one, you create doubt, not only in you as the service provider, but doubt in their mind of what's going to work for my business. I came in here looking for executive decision making with somebody to help me make that decision rather than some plethora of options that I can't choose which works better, which is where you end up finding a mishmash of concepts get mushed together into something that's an absolute Frankenstein dog breakfast. So that's the reason why I do one concept, and that applies to an internal identity with your values and personality and purpose, even to the strategy before that. With a brand strategy, I see it a little bit differently to others. Some brand strategists see brand strategy as values, purpose, and mission and vision and personality. I see it as segmentation and then targeting, then positioning, then some objectives and some tactics, things you can do to achieve those objectives. That's got to be single-minded. You can't have a bajillion different ideas of what you're going to position a brand as, because that's just ridiculous. We could be this or we could be that. Great. Make a call on it as the brand expert coming into this. And this same mentality would apply to an app or to a website or to some copy or whatever it is you do as a creative. They came to you for what you think is the best option. Otherwise, they would have gone to 3 different service providers and then picked. And that's what you do when you do requests for proposals with pitching. It's not good. So if they've come to you, give them an option on what you think is best. Trust your gut. Yes. Maybe show it to some other creatives and riff off each other and say, is this actually good? Like, am I doing the right thing? And this is why you have, creative teams, obviously. But if you're a solo person like I am, you kind of got to riff off some other creatives. So you've got to find a network in that respect to do that. And that's what I've found, a really good support network of just a small handful of people go, guys, what do you think? Give me some honest feedback. And then vice versa. I'll give them the honest feedback as well. And that works as a very nice mutual arrangement of having a team, but not really. And then when it comes to presenting in this process, to make sure that a client is satisfied with the result and is confident in the result and confident in me, is that I show them in context. And context is key with anything, is to paint the picture of what this is going to look like in their world. And it would be the same as in a website, getting them hands-on with an active, prototype build where they can feel it and touch it and experience it themselves. With a brand, I want to make them feel like they can touch it, be it a website mock-up, be it a signage, stationery, merchandise. Give them ideas that they didn't even think they wanted to really do. I've even branded toilet paper for an accounting business, just to get their mind really, getting really creative into something that really leans into the personality that we've created for them, which was very much appropriate to some toilet paper in that particular instance. And that just bridges the gap between concept and reality. And I really feel like that's the difference, in addition to one concept that can position you as someone that can give them the confidence in you to keep working with you, and you form those relationships, and that gives off a very easy referral to somebody to want to work with you or recommend. And look, by all means, I've had people that have recommended me, wholeheartedly, gone, work with Frank, he's great. But it still takes that person that has been referred to you to start forming that relationship. So you're still at kind of a square one. You're a little bit warm. You're still warm, but you still got to go through the rigmarole of the chat that you have. And sure, I have pitch decks and things like that show the process and all those kinds of things. And I've got my work on my website. There's a bit of a gallery of things of what I can do. There's obviously a plethora of content as well to show that I know what I'm talking about. I walk the walk myself as much as I possibly can. If you want to take the leap with me, fantastic. Let's do it.
I have a few things that I jotted down. And one thing that I found super interesting was that you showed them one option, because when I was in advertising school, I also was working for advertising agencies when I was still back in Austria, and I was just an intern, but I ended up having some of my copy displayed in McDonald's stores and stuff. So it was still like nice. But at the same time, they always told us to show 3 options. And sometimes you have one option where you're like, this would be perfect, and you just want to show them this one option. But they're like, oh no, they pay for something, they want to see 3 options minimum. And then what happens is you just come up with something quick and easy, third option, where you're pretty sure they're not going to take it. 99.9% of the time, they will take the crappy option that you did to just add a third option. And they will choose that one. I don't know what the physics behind this is, but it always happens. So I like that you have the one option approach.
I think you would call it Murphy's Law. You'd call it Murphy's Law because it's something that if it's going to happen, it's going to happen kind of thing. Like, it's bound to happen if you put it out there into the world. You put that energy or juju or whatever you want to call it out there, and it just fails. It fails unanimously so much. I can't begin to understand the rationale of why 3 or 2 is quantifiable, because the end result ends up being, sure, it's collaborative, and that's the argument generally in these cases, but we want to collaborate with our client. I said, well, my argument back is, at what stage out of 4 stages that I take my client through with a general brand strategy and brand identity is not collaborative? We are having conversations throughout. This is not their field of expertise. They've come to somebody like me for hopefully the answer, but to bring their idea to life as well. Like, why give them the difficulty in those options? And look, even if a client says, I want to see 2 options, let's say, I won't do 3, I'll refuse to do 3, it's just ridiculous. If a client says I even want to see 2 options, I say, yeah, sure, pay me more, not double, but enough for me to invest as much energy as I have throughout this. It probably should be double if I'm doing one concept throughout, end to end. But even in other examples where I had organization reach out last year and said, we were interested to know if you would like to pitch for this project. We're looking to do X, Y, and Z. We're looking for 3 options, and we're engaging with 2 other agencies in addition to you. I said, so what, you're going to mill through 9 different options to kind of get what you think is going to work for you? Does that sound beneficial to you? Like, how are you going to make that decision? And they said, well, look, we'll just roll them right on table and just see what we think works. I said, look, if I do this for you, I'll only do it if I can give you one option, because you're not going to pay me for this. I'll just do it because I like the business that you have. I've been to the place that you have as part of your business. So I've experienced it, and I'd like to maybe help you out, give you an option. If it's no good, there's no skin off my teeth, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I'm going to give you one option. And sure enough, I was the one that was picked. And I was just like,
congrats.
As soon as they said, like, they called on the phone and said, oh, yeah, we'd like to work with you. And I went, get out. Like, really? I said, really? Okay, cool. Let's rock and roll then. So yeah, I kind of feel like you got to stick to your guns with this. You can't back into a corner and go, okay, sure, I'll do 3 options and just kind of figure it. But the creatives I see that do 10, 20 options, like it gets to a point where it's ridiculous. For $500, I'm like, how do you make any profit off that in terms of comparing your time to effort output and the end result? Like that to me is crazy. But it does require all the rest of it. It requires the context. It requires a lot more of an in-depth process than, being on Fiverr and asking someone for a logo based on a 2-sentence brief and delivering them just a logo and that be it. And I've had clients as well that a recent one that said, mate, if all you showed me was just a logo by itself, I would have been like, what the F? Like, what the hell? This what's the concept behind this? But without seeing the long tail, the hidden tail that no consumer is going to see, it's only privy to them. How could I make that decision better if I didn't have that context? So that's that's expanded the spiel a lot longer than Cliff Notes. Sorry.
No, I find it so funny, because the other thing is, even if they don't pick that third whatever option, the other thing they would ask you to do is to merge some of the other options together. So they want these colors, but with those shapes or something like that. And what you said, like, they want to see the options, but they don't really know what they want and need. So the strategy that you have with, okay, let's sit together. What are your goals? How you want to position yourself? Then there should only be one answer. If the result is we want our brand to be evoking fun and trust plus X, Y, and Z, and this is our audience, this, that, then there should just be one option, because then this would be the one ticking all the boxes. Yeah.
I'll say the caveat to that is that it's not lost on me as well that if that client went to 10 different people to do the same output, it would look 10 different ways. That's not lost on me. There might be some coincidence that people might choose the same color or a similar kind of look or feel and tone to the brand. That's fine. But at the end of the day, they've chosen you as what you think is best, and you've come up with your own style and approach to it. And it's whether or not that they agree with it. If not, for me, there's always a revision opportunity. So if I really don't nail it, there's always an opportunity for the client to come back and say, hey, I'm not quite feeling it. And we kind of break down why it's not working for them and really get into the weeds, I guess, of that. But I've never really had to go into the weeds, especially in the visual aspect. It's usually been in the strategy and the internal kind of identity that hasn't quite nailed their team dynamic, and then producing a relevant message that gets to the core of what they're trying to achieve.
How long did it take you to come up with the process that works like this?
So for me, in terms of getting to that process, again, it's as much of an evolution as the brand that I have. When I started, it was doing a couple of options, but when I sort of got into it, it was like, I can't be asked making more, because I know what this looks good. This I've tested it. I've put it into context. I've shown how it can look, and it looks great. It has energy. It has this certain characteristic that we're trying to achieve. I'm just going to be filling the numbers here with another concept, and kind of went into that first meeting with one of my first clients saying, look, I've made this concept. I've got another one here. To be honest, it's really bad. You might like it. I'm not too sure, but I don't think it's as well resolved as this. And just be perfectly honest with them. If they chose it, that's on them. It's not my problem. They choose what they like, and that's fine. It's their business, not yours. Then you're going to take that onus of owning the work that you do. Again, at the end of the day, it's not an artist, you are a designer, you are solving someone else's problem. It's not yours that you are solving. As much as you can, you want it to look respectable so you can put it in your portfolio. But there's plenty of work that I don't share in my portfolio that isn't sexy, isn't an interesting thing to share. But that's just the bread and butter kind of things that I do on the day-to-day. But the process, evolved from a couple of options. One of those first clients, I gave 2 options and they merged them together. Funny that.
There you go.
It's just a Frankenstein. And I still see it today with other friends, some that are branding people that go in with a few options, and they say they merged a couple together. They just couldn't get away from some of the elements. They loved them so much they just wanted to keep them. So we had to kind of mush them together. It works, but it's still a mushed kind of idea. They've made it work because they're good at what they do. And even others that aren't the branding people, they've got other branding people to help them. And they said, we've got presented with 3 options and we just loved them all so much. We just couldn't let them go, but we ended up taking bits and bits and bits and bits and bits and pushed them all together. And in the end result wasn't so good, or some of them were, okay, and some are great. It really depends on the person executing it, obviously. But it's just a hodgepodge of stuff. So for me, that process, it just trial and error to see what works. I've done things where it's just been strategy and workshop only. I've done it where it's only been the brand identity only, and split it up into phases. So I show them the internal identity and messaging and visual identity all separate, and get them to sign off each one before we progress to the next one, and then get them to pay for each one before we progress. But now it's just, we do the workshop. We're going to do through this process of strategy and internal identity. You sign off on it if it works for you, and then I'm going to go away and work on the external communication of messaging and visuals, and you're going to see it all in context then. You're going to see the method to the madness. You're going to see the plan come together into the fruits of your labor, and then you can go out and do whatever you like with it, or you can work with me to execute it out and deploy it into your world. But that's the process for me and how it's evolved.
Sounds like a good process. And also the recent reels you did with no revisions and the guidance you give them along the process proved that it must work. Was there any project that really stuck with you?
What do you mean by stuck?
Could be in a good or bad way. Maybe something that happened in the project where you were like, okay, I'm not going to do this again. I'll learn from this and we'll change it. For example, showing 2 options and having to merge them, things like that. Or something where maybe you learned something, or it was like such an amazing project that evolved into something much bigger than you thought. Is there anything that comes to mind?
I'll give you a good and a bad. Bad one is diverging from the process. I've worked with a client where I diverged from the process and it just became hard. And by hard, I mean the client wasn't receptive. I assumed that they would be maybe a bit more au fait with branding and marketing than they actually turned out to be. And there's no disrespect to them. I'm not expecting my clients to understand this stuff, but I came into it believing that they had a little bit more experience in this area. And lo and behold, me diverging from my process to share them little bits along the way just fell very flat and wasn't very receptive. And they started questioning my ability as an individual, rather than like them thinking maybe I should have chosen an agency with a lot of people with a lot of different heads in this. And I was like, geez, I've really put myself into a bad position here because I didn't follow my process. And that's what someone's buying into, is this process as much as it is the end result. They're buying into me and my head and experience and whatever these fingers do to create the magic that happens at the other end. If I'm moving away from it, I know it's not going to be a good result. And every time I've been forced to diverge from it, it has not worked out as well as what it could have, put it that way. Whereas the times where I have followed a process just to an absolute T, like I'm talking absolute T, and this just happened with a brand, Think Loud, where it was a smaller budget than what I'm usually working with because it's a repeat client, in the startup phase, wanted to help him out, and gave him a process that was exactly the same because I knew if I just dumbed down the process into something that was a lot more reduced, it wouldn't create a great result. So I just went for it and used this as an opportunity to really show the proof in the pudding of how this process works and that it could be done within 30 days with one concept, no revisions, clients happy, process works. As a case study for all case studies that should precede it now, that for me was the most recent, just good little pat in the back kind of thing to myself, in a way that says to me, you know what you're doing kind of thing. Whether or not it really resonates with their audience is a hard thing to answer, but for them, my client, at least if it resonates for them, they can go out there with the confidence that they have now the things that they need, be it the visuals, be it the message, be it the internal belief of what it is they offer and who they're talking to as a target market, then fantastic. That's all I can really do. I can't really do the rest of it for them. I don't do their marketing. I don't do their business strategy and their day-to-day operations. I can be there in terms of brand management if they want me to. That to me is all I can really do. And it's proving itself very good over the last 2 to 3 years now. That process has not failed me.
Nice. If you were to start all over again today to get to where you are now, would you still do it? And if so, how?
I always say this to people that if this failed, whatever it is I'm doing failed, I just go start a lawn mowing business, just something that just really didn't require a whole huge, it's an effort, but just something that was just mundane, easy, predictable kind of job. That said, would I do it again? Sure. If the opportunity presented itself, sure. If the situation called for it, sure. I'd probably just get a job instead. But to do it all again from scratch, if I knew what I knew now, great. If I didn't, if my memory was like a Men in Black wiped to 2018 and I was back in 2018, probably not. Especially if someone said to me, look, you've done all this stuff. You were really good at it. Something failed somewhere in the thick of it. We can't tell you your process and what you did to really nail it so well for those few years, but it could be possible. You just got to figure out if you want to do it again. I'd be like, that's a gamble. And it might not be a gamble I'm willing to take, especially if I had a young family, which I did at the time.
So just before we end this conversation, there are a few questions that I ask all of my guests. And one of them is, would you ever go back to a permanent job?
I'd rather not.
Cool. And if you could go back in time to, let's say 2018, when you were waving from the production company to branding, what would you today tell your past self?
Oh, I'd tell them to follow a particular individual a lot earlier than what I did. That would probably be it. One particular individual is a marketing professor, or he might not be anymore, but his name's Mark Ritson, and he was kind of someone that opened me up into the idea of what brand strategy really could be, or marketing strategy, however you want to define it or call it. But his kind of approach to brand building and management and strategy was something that I think has changed my perspective of the value of what a brand can be to a business and how it can be done, both in the short term and long term, for small business, for big business. I guess kind of an influential person from the sidelines. I haven't bought anything that he offers, which I feel kind of bad by. He has a fantastic mini MBA course that you can do. I haven't had the money to really stump up for it. I feel like I've just watched a lot of his YouTube talks and a lot of his content and articles that he writes to get enough information that's given me a decent enough foundation to add to the design and branding skills that I have, that I think has matured my understanding of branding. And I think if I had that maybe a little bit earlier, because I was searching for that for like at least 3 to 4 years.
Wow.
If I had that a little bit earlier, I think that might have been a bit of a game changer. Would I have understood it then? I don't know. But yeah, that'd be my answer.
And if you think of 5 years from now, I don't know how old your kids are, but I think, yeah, you said 2018.
Mm.
So your kids will be maybe almost going to high school. Is that how you call it? Like higher
Yes.
educational? Yeah.
Yes.
So if you think where your business is going to be, maybe the type of brands you will have worked for by then, what do you think your future self would tell you today?
Trust the process. Like, other than that, I don't know what else you would say to somebody in that context, especially in mine, because I'm always looking back at what I've done and seeing what has worked and what hasn't. And what has worked has always been when I followed a process. And for me, it's always trust the process. And the other mentality that complements it is it will always work out. Some reason it does. If it's good fortune, whatever it is, it seems to always work itself out. There is challenges obviously along the way. You know, I wouldn't want to scare myself with those pitfalls, I guess. But I guess it's a case of if it was a successful outcome in 5 years, trust the process, you know, and make sure that you just keep thinking it's all going to work out, because I'm not looking for a very opulent life or run a big massive agency. I'm very, very not sedentary life, but just a very simple, easily manageable life until my kids are at an age where I don't need to worry about them as much as I do, at a sense of not having to change nappies and all that kind of stuff and dress kids and make them food and all the rest of it. That's what I'm talking about, where I can go off and maybe do the next leap of things, which might be having people do the work, I guess, for me and do all those kinds of things that I can go off and do other things. Then there's a lot of crazy ideas that I do have. But yeah, if I said to myself from 5 years, it all works out because you trusted the process, that's all I'd want to hear.
Nice. Well, thank you so much, Frank. I had a lot of fun chatting with you.
Pleasure. Thank you, Elisabeth, for having me.
If anyone of the listeners want to learn more about you, where can they find you?
Where you can find me, I would just point you to Instagram, because it's the easiest way you can really get involved with me in terms of what it is I do and put out there. So at G'dayFrank, GDayFrank on Instagram, and then you can find all my other links from there.
Perfect. Thank you so much and have a good day.
Thank you so much.
What an insightful conversation with Frank. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I'm linking all the things we covered in the podcast in the description of this podcast, including his Instagram. If you liked this episode, please leave a review and hit the follow button. This helps the Freelance Blueprint to get suggested to more freelancers who can learn from more insights. Feel free to share this episode with any freelancers and brand designers you know who can benefit from listening. That's all from me, and I can't wait to have you join again next week.